ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Rio Bravo Fine Art Gallery. I'm Kara Jagger-Gusson, your current Arts Council President. And if you attended our membership event last night, thank you. We appreciate your support, and it was a lot of fun. Today's artist is originally from the Dallas, Texas area. He's lived in Taos, New Mexico for 38 years. He studied graphic design. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big cheersy welcome to Allred.
So I am from the Dallas area originally. I squatted for 27 years my escape. Wow, I didn't belong in that part of the world. So I did successfully escape to the Taos area. It was life-altering because I came here to paint and wound up producing art reference books for some of the finest artists in this country. It was a freaky thing. Most of the artists in that region don't even know that I paint. I'm just the guy that does their books. So I've worked with some of the best that ever lived in that area. Walt Gonski. I've handled a lot of publication work for Nikolai Feshin's museum up there. Great Russian painter who produced an enormous body of work up there, yet only lives in Taos for 6 years. And created a home up there that is a sight to behold. Everything in it is hand carved. Every finial, every doorpost, everything in the place is hand carved. Walt Gonski came there to ski and did not know that Nikolai Feshin lived in that area ever. And drove by and saw the museum and said, what? He turned to his sisters. Nikolai Feshin Museum's there. He goes, oh yeah, he lived here for a few years, and so yeah, he created a huge body of work. That was his hero. So boom, he went back to Newark, packed his bags, and moved to Taos, and has been producing work there ever since. Another fabulous artist that lived in that region was Jean Claus, and Jean Claus she was born in California, in the Bay Area. She graduated from Berkeley in 1924, and in 1928, she and Phillips Claus, who would become her husband, they kind of started their relationship. So those are going to be three of the key players that are going to march through this little tribute to realism. One of the things that people don't really realize, because we're artists and we're just doing our thing. We're standing in an easel, we're sitting in a sewing machine, we're standing with a chisel in our hand. We're just creating. And eyes being windows to the soul, you can see into it as easily as you see out of them. So we are imbued with a power that other people don't possess. We can show them something they're not seeing by simply focusing on that spot. Case in point. This is January Rodarte. This is a painting by Walt Gonski that was done about 10 years ago. Everything in that picture's gone. We had a huge fire up in that region last year in the summer, burned 500 plus square miles of northern New Mexico. That's all black and gone. And he captured it because that's what Walt does. He could paint anywhere in the world, but he has focused his life on capturing that region because that's what moves his soul, that's why he moves there. So, that being said, this is Jean Claus. She was elected to the National Academy in 1950. The first woman to be elected to the National Academy got there because they saw, oh my God, these fabulous etchings. We got to get him in here. And to get into the National Academy, you have to submit a self-portrait. So she sent in her self-portrait, and that's when they first discovered that Jean Claus is short for Geneva. They didn't know it was a woman, and boom, she got through the door quite by accident. That being said, in the background of her self-portrait is the Golden Gate Bridge. This is from her home, where she lived in the Bay Area. She wound up, after studying at Berkeley and becoming an etcher, She cataloged more of the Golden Gate Bridge construction than anybody else alive. She just did it as practice. She was down in the Bay Area. On the left, that's the Golden Gate, before a pillar was poured, and then under construction, and then near the completion. And she documented gobs and gobs of this. During that period, this is right after she graduated, she and Phillips went to the Golden Mile Theater. And they conducted artist salons and, kind of just did little gatherings of bohemian artists. And she would take some of her etchings. Phillips was a poet, so he would do poetry readings. And this particular night, there was a concert that they attended. And after the concert, they were all hanging out in there. And there was a young concert pianist that had performed that evening. And he came up to Jean, was looking at her etching, and said, I'm kind of playing with photography, and I really like the way you take the light and dark, and photographs should be based on the way you handle your etchings. That young composer stopped composing and became a photographer, and his name was Ansel Adams.
Wow.
So hang on to that, because this is going to be quite a ride. This is how the eyes of an artist and their display of their work commandeer the thoughts of everyone around you. The beauty of Jean's work also is that if you're familiar with the etching process, you generally get 35 to 75 etchings per plate. They're carved into a copper plate, and then prints are made off of that. So that gives the potential of not seeing a gene clause, but one of a series of gene clauses. So she was actually more prolific than almost any other artist in Taos, because she herself produced over 18,650 etchings, pulled them all herself through her own press. So after this, they got married, they came to Las Cruces and through the Mesilla area, where Philip's brother had a ranch, and then proceeded on a honeymoon up to Santa Fe Taos region. And Ranchos de Taos is the oldest continually worship service church in North America. It's right there in Ranchos. The St. Francis of Assisi Church. It was built in 1774 and has held continual service, masses there through that entire period. Indian wars, the works. Now, the funny part of this is that is probably the most photographed church in all of North America, and painted and celebrated. People come from all over to see that view. And here's the funny part. Upper left, Gene Claus. Upper right, Chris Morrell. Lower right, me. People have painted this and have come from Europe, Japan. They come from all over the world to paint this. And it's actually the back of the church. This is the interior of it. And Gene Claus did a Sunday Mass etching there. And this was in the 20s, late 20s. Ansel Adams shows up in 1929 and takes a picture of the back of that church. And from that point forward, everybody painted the back. Nobody even knew that was not the front of the church. That's the front of the church. That's what Nikolai Feshin and Blumenstein and all the guys that came to Taos to paint, the missions and that type of thing, that's what they painted. They didn't pay any attention to the back. It was Ansel Adams took a photo, and suddenly everybody's eyes shifted. So that's the power that we have, just grabbing somebody's head and turning and saying, look at that. Occasionally, this is that photo I took at the church. Occasionally, this is a Brad Price piece. He's a contemporary painter from Santa Fe. You'll get someone who'll paint the front of the church, but it's more modernistic. And Harold Joe Waldron, right there on the wall, there's sections of that church. But I have not seen any sections of the front of that church. It's just sections of the back. Over to the left in that upper left photo is the wall, that's the courtyard of the St. Francis Church. All of this focus was given to this church and its surroundings. Ruins were painted from all over that region. This place to the right was actually, there were several scenes in Easy Rider that were filmed in that home. And it was up and running in an Adobe home at the time. It has fallen into ruin. It's purportedly, I mean, rumor has it, that's where Dennis Hopper tried to rape Jodie Foster. It has stood there just dissolving into the landscape. And people have painted, you know, like, Gonski painted ruins all over that region. He's not like opposed to the ruins. I mean, he obviously liked that. That's, you know, the cover of his book is a ruin. So I painted it because somebody needs to look at that. If you Google Rancho's Church, people stop and take pictures of that like they're curious, they don't know what it is. So I put that out there to see if other people would pay attention to it and start painting it, just kind of as an experiment. And it's the first painting sold out of show, so it literally didn't get seen, but just for a minute. This is a painter from the Taos area, Peggy Himmel. That view is off the porch of another artist up there that Peggy hangs out and paints with. And the churches area is another small artist community. All of these areas are at extreme threat because we are seeing across New Mexico an influx of really, really rich people. And they can step in, and man, you talk about their local neighborhood. This happened in Taos, and it's continually happened, and every millionaire, billionaire that has showed up in Taos, they've left town in utter ruin. Like something, remember Tom Morell showed up there about 17, 18 years ago. The man spent $126 million renovating areas in Taos. Like took entire historic neighborhoods and renovate them for sale. So it's basically reverse development. He just brought him back to a saleable space and lost everything. The guy just plowed out and is destitute, blew a fortune. These two barns, or the same barn, just from opposite directions, still stand simply because Peggy Himmel and Will Gonski paint that. The house to the left there, that's a developer that moved there from somewhere in the Dallas area and was going to bulldoze the barn and all of this. And the locals said, no, Will Gonski paints that barn. And so they left it. You know, we actually have the power to preserve just by capturing something. This is down in Pilar. That area, everything that you see there, that's not BLM land except for right against the edge of the river. All that's private property. And this is headed into Taos. This view is El Salto. This area right in the foreground, where you see that first fence post on the left, that's private property. Everything past that, all the way to that mountain, that's all reservation. It's all Taos Pueblo. That post right there marks the beginning, like the edge of the highway. That row of trees back there is the beginning of Pueblo land. The house to the right, Donald Rumsfeld. And they were going to develop all that area. One section of it, unbelievably, was going to be a dollar store, because who doesn't need another dollar store? And literally the artists called their patrons and said, we can't have that. You know, that's a sacred view across there. So a group of wealth got together that were patrons of the artists there and pooled their money, and the Taos Land Trust bought that entire strip of property to preserve it for perpetuity. There'll never be a hotel between you and that view. It's a matter of protecting the region. This is that same view from the right, or from the left, going up to Arroyo Hondo. That peak is not actually part of Taos Mountain. Taos Mountain is sacred to Taos Pueblo. This is part of an old Spanish land trust. And once that starts to wall down and Spanish families start to die off, they wind up parceling to their children. And because they're Catholic, they don't parcel to a child, they parcel to 8 or 14 of them. So these areas like this get chopped into little bite-sized pieces, unless other siblings die off. The upper left one, the Richards painting, is a horse ranch at Taos Pueblo. From where the guy on the horse is to the back, to the foot of that, that's all Pueblo land, so that view will be protected somewhat. A block past that, all of that property on the left-hand side is private. And it will eventually be developed because that little peak on the right there, that's Taos Ski Valley. And Louis Bacon showed up about 4 years ago and slapped $112 million on the table and bought out the ski valley in like a single check. So we are going to, whether we like it or not, development is going to happen. But that means that, if we pay attention, we have the capacity to control that somewhat. On the way here yesterday, I got a phone call from a friend of mine in Silver City that said, "Hey, do you know so-and-so?" And I said, "Yeah." She's an attorney up there as well. A friend of mine's going to buy a property and wants to develop it. And I want to give him your number because you know about everybody's everything in Taos. And I said, "Okay." So what's his plan is, he wants to buy Mary Lane Leslie's property and develop it. And it's right there on that swoop sticking out. And the first curve to the right, it's that whole section across there is her property. So the magic part of that is he gave him my phone number, and I'm going to tell the guy the truth. Water there is 500 feet deep, and it's solid rock. So you're not drilling for water with a water well, you're drilling with an oil unit. You've got to drill through the salt from 500 feet. So that single phone call, I'm not going to be able to protect that area right there. It's like, oh no, you don't want to buy that. You might put some teepees out there and do that type of thing, but that's just really not a place you want to put in a hotel or a residential area, honestly. So this section is going to be about Native America. And we, here in New Mexico, we have the largest concentration of Native peoples that have never been moved from their original position. A lot of the other tribes across America, were washed to Florida and Oklahoma and lost their lands. So pretty much everybody with the Pueblo got to keep their space. They were already established, so they just put a fence around them where they were. Now, that being said, this is the turtle dance at Taos Pueblo. It's held every New Year on January 1. The guys are up there in buckskins, and it's usually around 6 to 8 degrees because they start at 6 o'clock in the morning. And then this, and they've done that for hundreds of years, thousands maybe. This is the procession of the Virgin at Taos Pueblo. And this is close to 500 years old. The original mission that's behind this to the right, during the Pueblo Revolution, the women and children of the tribe were taking shelter in there during the Spanish uprising, or in the Indian uprising. They cannonaded the place, they bombed it and broke it down with the women and children in. So, as Catholics do, they built a new shrine, and every year on Christmas Eve, they march the Virgin out of there. This was done, I believe, in 1936. This is the same processional going up the walkway in front of the North House. This is Richard Nichols painting the same scene 4 years ago. This is him about 10 years ago. This is me last year. The only thing that changes in this is like parasols and clothing. That has been there for perpetuity. And you're allowed to paint those things. You're not allowed to photograph those things. And this all began around 1950. There were a lot of artists, especially from back east, Ira Moskowitz, and there were painters that came through New Mexico. It was kind of a Southwest Florida during that period. And they painted the ceremonies. They were not allowed, even back then, to photograph them, at Taos Pueblo. So most of these pieces from Taos Pueblo, excuse me, they're family and friends. The artists know them. So Rich Nichols painted this eagle dancer, just a few years ago, and this is a family friend. That's allowed. He cannot paint that from a photograph. So in all of those scenes, all those were done for either sketch or memory. There's no photographs allowed of that event. So Jean Claus would take a sketch pad, leave it in a truck. She would go and watch a dance or a ceremony, run to her truck, and sketch it furiously, to try and capture that moment. And because those do not change, they're the same ceremony every year, it allowed her to come back the following year and finish the sketch she started 5 years ago. Sometimes it would take her a half a decade to get the sketch done enough to complete it. And most of the other stuff, are either from someone that has painted off of another person's work, or they went there and watched the ceremony themselves. It's quite amazing. There's these huge pitchwood bonfires that are built like, 18, 20 feet tall, set on fire, so these bonfires are burning, and it heats the whole area. The entire plaza is just like standing in a living room. This was Jean Claus's favorite etchings, and these eagle dancers are Adam and Pat Trujillo. They were friends of hers. She was allowed to do those illustrations, and they would sometimes bring their ceremonial clothing to her house or studio and let her, do those etchings like live. The point in all of this is that other than that, nobody in this room will ever see that. They don't perform that live anymore. This is something that's very close. She used Adam and Pat a lot. They were dear friends, so she was able to capture stuff that most people will never ever be able to witness. So these are unlike photographs where it's like capturing your spirit and frowned upon. These were allowed by the natives because A, it was an art form, and B, they befriended the people. They knew that they weren't strangers or tourists that showed up and, stick, just shooting photos. Same thing here. Aaron Garlic, a young painter in Taos that is probably going to be Blumenstein's replacement. He paints a lot of the native people there, but the guy on the left, Lyle, he graduated from high school with him. These are friends of his. So you can kind of get away with it. A lot of people paint, we have this running joke in Taos, we want to sell a painting, three Indians on horseback. Just pick a scene, put 3 Indians on horseback, and boom, it'll sell. But they don't know those people. They're just semblances of somebody from Taos Pueblo. This is a painting that I did for the turtle dance. This is some red coral flower. She's a friend of mine. her aunt was our housemate for several years. When the pandemic struck, Patricia Michaels, the fashion designer from Project Runway, was trapped in Santa Fe. They locked the gates to all the reservations. You know, the Native Americans, they're America's unicorns. There are no more. You know, just what's there, whatever's being sustained in their tribe are all that there are. So they closed every reservation in the country. And this was the last photo I took at Pueblo before the pandemic. And they're friends of mine. And I was at their village house and asked them, can I take your photo to paint for them? And they said, yeah, sure. So I managed to paint these pieces off the photographs that I took in their house that day, but I could not step out the door with my camera and take a picture of the turtle dance, or they would seize my camera. And they're a sovereign nation. They can keep your camera. They don't have to give it back to you. You know, they just take it. This is that, literally outside that blue door, right straight ahead of us there, through the little line. This is 2 years after that photo was taken, and other than mine and Pat's footprints, there's nobody there. The Pueblo, after the pandemic, everything just closed. So that's literally a unicorn photograph. She told me when I dropped her off at the village house, she goes, you should take a picture of that because I have lived here all my life. I've never seen no footprints of that snow. It just stopped everything. So I don't know if I'll paint that or not. We'll see. It captures, these are capturing historical moments. This was Gene Claus's Midsummer Fiesta, the San Ildefonso Pueblo. If you go there now, those cottonwoods they were probably 500 years old, they're dead and gone. And now it's just this barren, kind of empty parking lot looking type area. So she managed to capture a lot of stuff that, you know, as a photographer, a painter, or, you know, as an illustrator, we can do things that other people with cameras can't, and capture moments that nobody else is ever going to see again. Ira Moskowitz produced these lithographs in 1946. These are Mescalero Apache over in the Rio Grande region. And this is the Dance of the Mountain Spirit. They still perform this, and they actually allow you to photograph this. You can go in there and take pictures. But that same process, he did this in the early 40s and in 1950, because so many tourists were showing up for the snake dance, it became really dangerous. These guys were walking around with rattlesnakes in their mouth. And kids were running in and out of their legs, and everybody snapping photos and stuff. And it's a religious ceremony, so they just stopped. And now it's closed. It's no tourists are allowed. It's a secret ceremony. So he actually captured that at the very tail end of it. Later went back in the 80s and did the lithograph in color to kind of capture the colored spirit of all that. But you or I we'll never see that ceremony. That's like the only records of it, what artists captured during that period. I'm a realist painter. I collect abstract works. I have a high appreciation for that. But we possess a power that most people don't have. We can guide an eye and show them beauty that most people will never see. Here across the Sierra County, this is a beautiful valley. And man, yeah, it's got its funky stuff about it, but capture it while you can, because it can be gone in an instant. Capture it while you can. Quilt it if you have to, Rebecca, but it's gonna go if we don't protect it, and the best way to protect it is shine a light on it. Make people see that, see your space for what you really respect and appreciate it for.